Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tadaima 2021. My name is Rob Buscher, and I'm the curator of our virtual film festival that has been presented throughout the pilgrimage. And I'm really pleased to be joined here tonight by Goh Nakamura, singer, songwriter, actor, film composer, and so much more. So, Goh, would you like to expand your intro a little?
Yeah, I guess I'm a musician overall first, and then I accidentally somehow fell into acting, I guess, playing myself in three movies directed by two movies directed by Dave Boyle and then one movie directed by Lin Shen. And also had one always had a foot recently have had one foot in the film scoring world, and then the other right now I have another foot in video game scoring. So
Awesome. Yeah, so we'll
yeah.
definitely get into some of the scoring stuff later, but I guess to kind of start us off, can you tell us a little bit how you got into music in the first place? I think I read that you were a graduate of Berkeley Music,
hmm
and I'm curious, were you a performance major or did you actually study composition?
Um, yeah, I started off as a performance major at Berkeley in Boston. Um, and it was basically a guitar track of like just you're just taking all guitar classes. And somewhere in there, uh, I kind of decided that I didn't want to go to school just to put on like one recital. That was like the goal. It was like too much pressure or something. And I had other interests. I actually I was dreaming about going into film scoring. So I took, they had this one program called professional music. And that means basically you can just pick and choose whatever classes you want. So I was taking all kinds of different arranging and film scoring classes, and just learning about harmony and chords and stuff. I mean, you're learning that stuff in the guitar track as well, but um, my roommate at the time was like one of the best guitarists in the school, so I felt like I got like my education from just being his roommate 90% of the time. And yeah, I knew I always wanted to go to Berkeley. Um, Mostly because I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, and all my friends were musicians basically, and we had this cool jazz improvisation class in high school taught by this guy named Jeff Leonard, who was a graduate from Berkeley. He was a really great teacher, and I was really into hard rock guitar at the time, and one of his classmates was Steve Vai, who was like my god. I was like, "Oh, you knew Steve Vai," so I had like this one degree of separation from him. So I totally worshipped him. And then all my friends went to Berkeley from high school, so I was like, "Oh, I want to follow them," and I basically did that.
Yeah, that's awesome. My sister April is a graduate of Berkeley as well, and she did music therapy. But I think one of the things that I heard from a lot of her course mates was that that education, as much as it was about the classes and the teachers, it was really about the other musicians that they met along the way and their peers and kind of coming up together. To the extent that a lot of folks didn't end up graduating because
Yeah,
they ended up, finding a band or finding
yeah,
a gig or something that
100%. Yeah,
allowed them to do that.
yeah.
So, like, what was it like for you then to go? Because I think there's a lot of musicians, obviously, who are out there in the singer songwriter world and just performers in general, who kind of skip the music school part and go straight to the stage. What was it like for you to kind of transition out of that environment of a music school? And like, how did you kind of get into the music scene in the San Francisco Bay Area?
It just took a really long time, like, uh, because I started out once I graduated Berkeley, I was just kind of playing guitar in random bands. I was in a goth band for a little bit, and I wasn't really like into the music that much, and I wasn't singing or I wasn't writing. I was just like a sideman for the band. It was fun to play out, but um, it was then also I was getting into more singer-songwriters like Elliott Smith, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Elvis Costello, and it was all like new stuff to me, like the Beach Boys even, and then kind of rekindling my love for the Beatles and music that I grew up with, but I hadn't been listening to for, maybe 10, 15 years because I got so into like jazz and Charlie Parker and that whole era. And then it was nice to kind of go back to the stuff that I grew up with. And I think I just remember I had a 4 track and I started like just making little songs, like almost as a joke at first, making these little jokey songs. And then as I started to get more serious, I was like, oh, why don't I just put together an album? In fact, I pretty much left Berkeley before I graduated, but I graduated by correspondence, and the project I just had to do a final project, and that was to release an album, and that was my first album, Daylight Savings. I just did it all in my bedroom, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I feel like it's again a similar story for a lot of folks who are at Berkeley, in terms of kind of moving on or and then having that kind of experience. But to a certain extent, it's almost like music school is a trade school to an extent, right? So it's like
Mhm,
you learned the trade, you're
mhm.
out in the world, you're making the music, and you're releasing the album anyways, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious, and maybe taking a step back. Can we talk a little bit about, were your parents supportive of this career choice? Because I mean, they're both Issei, right? Like immigrants from Japan.
Uh, my
Or
dad was Issei. My mom is Sansei, actually.
okay,
Yeah, yeah. And, my mom was a, music therapy major, actually, in college when she met my dad, and then, so she's basically definitely the roots of my origin story. Um, my dad was tone deaf, basically, but he appreciated music, but he was always super worried for, good reason, like, "How are you gonna survive?" And, you know, wasn't as supportive, but Um, yeah, so there was a balance. So I had like fear of like, oh man, I'm gonna be useless. I am useless. And then my mom was the one who introduced me to the Beatles and gave me my first guitar lessons and played Chopin every night as I was going to sleep as a kid. So that all leaked into my brain and is still there. Thanks,
yeah,
mom.
that's awesome. And I mean, I guess it kind of makes more sense too, just like thinking about the generational mindset. From an immigrant perspective, the want for your child to have a stable career path, and I think we both know, like as a fellow musician, like how unstable that music is, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's a very
yeah,
difficult way to make a living.
yeah.
Uh, so I'm guessing you were already in the Bay Area by the time that you did Daylight Savings. Is that accurate? Or
Yes, correct. Yeah.
and what was it like for you to kind of transition to living someplace that actually had a pretty significant Japanese American community? Because like I have friends in Concord, and I know like how non diverse that Lexington area is, right? So it must have been kind of like a revelation to suddenly be in that sort of environment.
Yeah, it was a trip. Like that moving to California definitely introduced me to like a lot of the Asian arts scene. So I went to Saratoga High, since Saratoga is a town near Cupertino in the Bay Area, and I think I think there were only like a handful of other Asian kids, maybe even 3, 4 other Japanese American kids. I don't know. Um, maybe more, maybe less. Pretty small school. But then basically after I graduated, it shifted. The demographic shifted. Like my sister's class was almost predominantly Asian. It was kind of this crazy wave that I just missed or something. Um, but anyway, I had graduated, and then I think I did like a random web search, and then one of my classmates, who went on to become a very successful cartoonist, comic book artist, is Gene Yang. Do you know who Gene Yang is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in my Japanese class actually, and I just remember seeing a headline with him in it. I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." He went on to do something awesome, and he's part of this thing called Kearney Street Workshop, which was like one of the oldest arts organizations, like Asian American arts organizations in San Francisco. So then I started meeting people in San Francisco who were part of that through this gig, this weekly gig at a Irish pub up in San Francisco called Ireland's 32. And then so yeah, I just met all these like really pivotal people. This is like circa 2003 or 4, and that was when I was releasing my album. So I had like a little neighborhood audience, which is kind of cool. Yeah, it was a fun time.
So then, kind of going from the release of your first album, how did the next few years of your career play out? I know that it was still, I think Surrogate Valentine came out in, was it 2010? So it was
Yeah, 2011, I think.
2011.
Yeah.
So a considerable amount of time between when you released your first album and then when the film comes out.
hmm
What were you just kind of getting into the music scene? Were you touring a little bit? Like, what did that look like for you?
Um, I never actually went on a real tour. I've never been like on a. I've never loaded my car up and like drove cross country or anything. I wanted to. I still want to. But I guess the closest I came to that was JetBlue did this all you can fly deal where like you buy like a monthly pass and you can fly to certain cities. So then I teamed up with my friends who were in a band called the Invisible Cities, and we just started hitting people up to see who would want to host a house concert or like find a venue for us to play. And that was like right before Surrogate Valentine. So I guess there's elements of that story of what happened. Nothing crazy, but just always just living out of a suitcase and just adventure every weekend kind of thing. Meeting people, meeting cool people and having fun.
So
But
how did you end up linking up with Dave Boyle then?
I met him at the San Francisco Asian International what's it called? CAM. It's called
Now it's
CAM now.
Cam.
It
Yeah.
used to be called SFIAF, San Francisco International
International.
Asian Film Festival.
Yeah.
But yeah, I met him. I wasn't even like really into films, to be honest. I just was like a bunch of my friends worked for it, so they'd be like, you know, come hang out. We're at a party or something, and just ended up meeting a lot of really cool creative people through that. And I guess I met him like around 2008 or 9, and we just hit it off. And then he asked me, he's like, "Hey, do you want to write a song for to promote my movie?" And I said, "Okay, sure." And then he offered to shoot a video for it, and that was sort of like the audition for his idea of Surrogate Valentine. And that movie came about. Um, I think he had just finished directing a movie called White on Rice. It was like a huge production, I guess, and he really enjoyed doing pickup shots with a smaller kind of guerrilla crew. So then he decided like, oh, I'm gonna make a movie for like $10,000, just using like just the essentials, just small crew and just a couple actors and just travel. It'll be a road movie. We'll just improvise sets and stuff. And it ended up being slightly bigger budget, but we I guess it was cool because we were able to press DVDs back then when people still had DVD players and bought DVDs. So we would sell the DVDs at the screening, like a band would sell albums, kind of. So that was like a that helped us a lot, and yeah, just like that can never happen again. But it was just such a cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about with Surrogate Valentine, and I think I'm really curious in terms of the production. It must have been in some ways really strange playing like a fictionalized version of yourself.
Hmm.
And I guess I'm wondering, how much of the writing process was collaborative to the extent that you're playing you. Were you able to like integrate actual elements of your own experience?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I had just watched it before I got on this call because I hadn't seen it for I can't remember how long. It's just always so surreal, like to just watch it and not be self-critical. I guess just kind of watch it for what it is, which I can finally do like 10 years later. Um, so I guess I just remember constantly texting Dave or instant messenger, and a lot of that some of that is like verbatim, like copy paste into like a document and then broken up into a script kind of. That's how I was doing it a bit. So, and there's certain elements that are like there's so many like sort of inside jokes in that movie to me that I had forgotten about until I watched it today. I was like, "Oh yeah, it's hilarious." Just like people that different experiences with different people.
Yeah, one of the questions that I had actually was about the ringtone because you you
Oh
use the
yeah,
same ringtone throughout the films, and
yeah.
I'm just curious if you could fill us in on what that was.
That's Mike Itamoto. It's just his battle cry, and yeah, I think he texted it to me once. He was like at a drive-through or something, and he just made that noise, and I thought it was really funny. So I made it my ringtone.
Yeah, I
And,
remember there was a throwaway line in Daylight Savings actually where he says like, "Is that me?" or something like
yeah, yeah, yeah. So stupid.
that.
It's so goofy.
But I mean, the funny thing is, I've been doing it for my kid. He's like 11 months old, right? Like he goes crazy.
Oh no.
Oh, he loves it. He loves it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an effective alarm clock for sure.
And I guess I'm curious too, like how much of the dialogue was scripted versus improvised?
Um, it was pretty tightly scripted. Although, so we would have sessions where, you know, like over video call, we would go through the script as it was written, and then have us have a rehearsal of it just improvised, kind of paraphrasing in our own language. So then Dave was taking notes and stuff. So it was a cool like way to extract like our personalities, I guess, and make it a little bit more organic, I guess. And for same with the second movie and even the third movie actually, we would kind of like go through and if there's any felt a little stiff, like certain lines that like I would say it and it would just I'd be like, no, I think I need to say it this other way. And yeah, everyone was super accommodating, luckily. So
Awesome. I guess it's been almost 10 years since the first film came out. Maybe
mhm,
exactly 10 years now.
mhm.
And having rewatched it recently, and then I guess having had the experience of getting to reprise the role in Lin Chen's film, can you talk a little bit about kind of what that process was like? I mean, did you ever think there was going to be a third film in the series?
No, no. Like I always was it was like one of those things where like I was like, well, maybe I'll write it. Maybe I'll direct it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. And then I obviously didn't do it. And then Lynn took the reins and like really charged and wrote and directed and acted the hell out of that project. And we're all amazed and happy. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was super excited to resuscitate the series. I guess I hadn't thought about acting for ages, so it was a challenge just to kind of pick it up again, you know. And it was just like having like a reunion, like a family reunion or reunion of friends. So it was really enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, on any indie film, like the cast and crew kind of become family, and that
Totally.
especially with the two films, the originals coming back to back like that. I mean, what
Hmm.
was the time frame between like getting Surrogate Valentine in the can and on the festival circuit, and then starting production on Daylight Savings?
It was so quick. Like we were basically working on it as we were touring it. We were working on Daylight as we were touring the first movie, the festival circuit, and it was like interesting because when we went to South by Southwest for Daylight Savings, I think it sort of got buried because people didn't expect us to make a second movie so quickly, you know. So, like, wait, didn't weren't you just here? How did you make another movie? But Dave works so fast, and he's a powerhouse.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the other question that I had in terms of, most people who make a indie film, maybe they joke about doing a sequel, but it's very rarely something that can become tangible. So,
Yeah,
was this something kind of going into the project that Dave was already thinking about, or did that just come about because of the success of it, or the way that the story ended up ending?
I think he wanted to do like a Truffaut thing with like the 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 character aging through over a bunch of movies. Um, so as far as I know, there's not going to be a fourth where I'm like an old senior citizen or anything, but I don't know. I guess anything's possible. Just have to stay alive.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting because to see that trajectory, and then absolutely, I think that Lynn did a tremendous job, kind of bringing the series into sort of the cinematic discourse that's happening right now.
Hmm.
Kind of reframing it a bit, like definitely focusing more on the female characters who were kind of the side supporting actresses in the originals, but
Hmm.
um, it's almost a reversal of roles in the sense that you sort of become like the supporting actor and telling the story of the women that your character had interacted with over the course of
Hmm.
the first two films.
Yeah, it's very cool. Brilliant idea to flip it, invert it, like as a composition technique, even. It's really cool.
In terms of, I guess, that particular like discourse, like one of the reasons that I was really interested in bringing Surrogate Valentine to the Tadaima Film Festival is because a lot of the other films that we've been programming have kind of explored like Japanese masculinity, and like the way that that's been shown through Hollywood films over a century, really. From Sesshu Hayakawa to
Right.
James Shigeta. We had a panel earlier in the pilgrimage about the typecasted roles that a lot of Japanese Americans are put into as villains, and
Hmm.
I guess what's so refreshing for me about the character that you play of yourself, is like how naturally the romance comes, because I mean it's not like comparative to the other tropes that had existed, either with Hayakawa being this kind of villain, and he was a male sex symbol in his time, but he was also a brute, and he was not somebody that like anyone contemporarily would see as a positive representation, nor even at that point in the 1910s and 20s. Even with James Shigeta, he had positive representations, but it's kind of like, how seriously did white American audiences take him in
Mm,
the post-war era? And it's not like his career was able to kind of transcend that time period. And I guess just kind of like, you know growing up, I imagine like you didn't see a whole lot of Japanese Americans like in these kind of positive roles, right? Like,
no,
um,
no.
so like, what was that kind of experience like? Like, was that something that you guys were thinking about or talking about, like when you were producing these films?
Not really, actually. Um, but I'm glad that there's like it's not actually like there's no like really on the nose dialogue about it in the films. But like, oh, it's so hard being an Asian male. Like, I didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I
Mhm.
just wanted to make a movie with people being people, basically. Asian people being people. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a really refreshing kind of counterpoint to things like, Shang-Chi, which I think we're kind of, as a community, celebrating for the fact that, we're kind of breaking through into Hollywood studio, but at the same time, something that's still trope laden within sort of martial arts, and
Yeah.
very very much lives within these kind of confines that Hollywood has sort of set. But as you say, the character that you play, which again is a fictionalized version of yourself, so it makes sense. Is just a dude, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just kind of living his life and doing his thing. And
Mhm.
um, I mean, I guess that's kind of, as someone who's been involved in Asian American cinema for a decade. There are a few portrayals like that exist even within sort of the canon of Asian American cinema.
Mhm.
And that's kind of why I wanted to highlight that within this particular film series.
Cool. Thank you. Um the very first script of Surrogate Valentine had me as Joe Nakamura. I just remember my sister hearing about it, and she was just like, "You're not gonna be Joe Nakamura. You're gonna use your name." And then I I don't know, maybe regretfully, I said, "Yeah, I just want to confuse everybody and just be myself, be a fictional." Like I thought of it as like a Larry David kind of situation, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess, as you had that experience with the film series, I know that in kind of the years between, you've been doing a lot more film scoring work,
Mhm.
and I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about how you got into that, and some of the projects that you've been involved with.
Sure. Yeah. I think it just being on that film festival circuit, you meet so many filmmakers, um, super talented people, some people who have skyrocketed to the stratosphere. Like Destin Cretton was one guy that I met in Cleveland, and now he's A-list. It's so cool. Um, I guess I don't have like an agent or anything, or like anybody finding me jobs. It's all from people pitching me uh, through friends or whatever. Um, and I would say the very first, I think actually even more so than like the Surrogate Valentine movies, like The Dragon Painter was like the first movie that I scored like, you know, as a full composer maybe. Because one, it's just like wall to wall music. It's like, and then two, I didn't have to like answer to anybody really. I could just, if I wanted to put like a weird blues number in, I could do it, because I always thought that the shamisen sounded a lot like a blues guitar with the scale and stuff like that. So it was super enjoyable and a lot of pressure, but it was, yeah,
Yeah.
crowning
So
achievement.
Well, we should definitely talk more about that. I think we had the opportunity to work together in terms of Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival commissioned you to do that soundtrack for The Dragon Painter, and we had the opportunity to present that as the opening night film in 2017, where you performed a live accompaniment to
Hmm.
the film as the opening night celebration, and I think it was really fitting. Just even in that kind of time period, thinking back to year one of the Trump presidency, and just kind of the sea change and the fight for the soul of the country that I think a lot of folks were feeling. It felt right for us to kind of go back to the origins of
Hmm.
like Asian American cinema, and obviously wanting to make that contemporary. And my thought process was that who better than you to kind of think through that musically and make it more relevant for contemporary audiences. But thinking about that process a little bit, um, as a silent film, as you said, it's wall to wall music. I mean, that's a tall order. I mean, what is
Yeah,
it, 56, 57 minute
yeah,
runtime?
yeah.
How did you even begin to approach something like that?
I just started from the very beginning, and I just was making all these little themes, and I just remember like working on something for like hours and hours, days and days, and then I just had this huge. This is how not to do it, by the way, because it will crash your computer. And then I'd zoom back on the timeline, and it was like this much, and I had like this much to go. I should have like really broken it up into more sessions, but I just had one monster session of like an hour, and it like totally destroyed my computer. But yeah, daunting. But
Yeah. I mean, I know that, some of the influences you had mentioned in the past, Japanese folk music, and
mhm.
then obviously you've got your own stylistic influences. Um, I think it was the Taishogoto that you brought,
I have it
yeah,
right here.
that guy.
Yeah, this thing's awesome. It's like a cross between a guitar and a typewriter. And this is not how you play it, by the way, but I don't even know how to play it properly. But um,
It definitely works in the context of the film, and I think like that was one of the really innovative things, especially to be able to perform that portion of the soundtrack live.
yeah, yeah, it was super cool uh, color to have in your palette. And I was terrified for that premiere because I hadn't rehearsed like the entire thing like enough sufficiently. So I was like writing the number, like which number I'm supposed to play in the dark. But yeah, I punk rocked it, I guess.
Well, it worked out, and I know our audience was really enamored with it, and I think out of recent memory, it was probably the best feedback that we got from the audience.
Oh, no way. Awesome.
And I'm kind of curious because I know that after that screening, you were able to go on and perform it at a couple of other film
Hmm.
festivals.
Yeah.
What was it like to kind of tour the film with the soundtrack?
It was it was a dream, man. It was like I've always wanted to do that. Basically, are you familiar with Bill Frisell,
Mhm.
jazz guitar player? He scored a bunch of Buster Keaton films, silent films. They're super fun, and the music's that music influenced me as well. Just wall to wall kind of silent film scoring, and yeah, I got to play it at Toronto as well as San Francisco, and then yeah, hopefully more in the future. I'd love to tour that around.
Yeah, I mean, it's such kind of a unique piece too, because in the context of Hayakawa's career, here he was, typecast as sort of this dangerous, forbidden lover before Rudy Valentino had even
Hmm.
become that in Hollywood.
Yeah.
and this was one of the 22 films that he released under his own studio, Haworth Picture Corp,
Hmm.
as basically an intentional attempt to correct some of the preconceived stereotypes about Japanese culture,
Yeah.
and deliver that in sort of an authentic way, with an almost entirely Japanese or Japanese American cast. So
Hmm. So
um,
cool.
yeah, but again, yeah, just kind of thinking through like, um, I'm curious, like how much of the like did you do any kind of reading about Hayakawa? Like what kind of inspired you to kind of bring the different sound textures into the film?
Um, I knew I didn't want to make it like overly Japanesey, like, you know, um, definitely didn't want to put any gongs in it or anything, or stereotypical. Um, I saw like I pictured like an orchestral kind of score, like from that time, 1919, and sometimes like I have this device that it records. It's a digital recorder, but you can change the speed, and it kind of makes things kind of warbly. So sometimes those old crusty orchestral recordings, since they're like on like a wire recording or like a old phonograph, like it has that kind of pitch. So I was recording some of the MIDI orchestra out of my computer into that machine just so it didn't sound too pristine, to add this like layer of dust on it. So that was like my secret weapon. And then yeah, and then sometimes I feel like some of that music sounds like it's sped up a bit because it's on like this turntable or whatever. So it's like a strange, like kind of surreal sounding representation of the orchestra at the time.
I mean, it definitely works because you figure even in the silent era when people had sound accompaniments to the
Hmm.
films, most of the time they were played on turntables, and depending on like the quality of the pressing of the record, or
Hmm.
what speed that they were playing it at, like
Yeah,
it definitely you've got like a lot of variation with that. So
yeah,
like having something too perfect wouldn't really suit a film of that age and grading.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so um, I know you've done some other soundtrack work beyond that. Are there other projects that you kind of think fondly of that you'd like to mention to the audience?
Probably the score for Be Water, the Bruce Lee documentary. That like funny thing is like I feel like the Dragon Painter was practice for that. So it was like a practice mountain to climb and like get to the top, and then um so that was also like wall to wall music for like about an hour, 72 minutes or whatever. And also not overly Asian stuff in there. Um and it being a documentary, you don't want to ever compete with the music, so with the dialogue, sorry. So just kind of like coming in waves and pulling back and stuff like that. Whereas like the Dragon Painter was the opposite, where I could just kind of push stuff to the forefront all the time, and it's got to like really push the I guess the subtitles, whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of interesting to think about how incredibly opposite those two projects are in that
Hmm.
respect. How did you get involved with Be Water?
Through my friend Bao Wen, the director, who I had met at the VC Film Festival here in Los Angeles, like during the Surrogate Valentine tour, basically. So yeah, I've been so incredibly fortunate to meet so many talented people through these film festivals, and having not having to go like a traditional route of like getting an agent and then doing auditions or whatever. It just mind blowing. I just hope it doesn't run out. But yeah, incredibly grateful.
It's one of those things too where I think, a lot of people who are further removed from the film festival scene don't realize how many Asian American creatives are actually participating
Yeah.
beyond filmmakers, right? And
Hmm.
like, you kind of have a foot in both worlds because of Surrogate Valentine. But even thinking about the role that like Asian American musicians have in like the broader Asian American movement, and I mean, in a lot of ways, that's kind of one of the last frontiers. I feel. I mean, I think as we see more Asian Americans in film and television, there's certainly a lot of things that could be done better. But at least we have like household names that people recognize.
Hmm.
Whereas I think, with Asian American musicians, they're further between and fewer that the average like American would be able to pull out off the top of their head.
Yeah, totally.
Um, I guess like I'm just curious from your perspective, how has that been a factor in your own career as a musician? Like trying to, I guess, fit into a box that maybe the promoters or um, who haven't necessarily understood how to promote an Asian American talent. Is that something that you've had to deal with at all?
Um, not not really. I mean, to tell you the truth, I haven't really tried to book any shows here in LA. Um, I also feel like I'm like on another planet because I feel like most of the Asian American music stuff is either rap, hip hop, or like like BTS or something, kind of boy band kind of stuff. So I'm like this dinosaur over in the corner or something. I don't know. Um, I don't know. Maybe that's just my perspective, but um,
I know
there's def-
Bobby Choi has had similar issues. Like we had a conversation a few years back when he came to tour his film in Philadelphia, and I think like especially given the attention that groups like BTS and
Mhm.
K-pop in general are getting,
Yeah,
like Bobby as a Korean American trying to fit, people hear he's Korean and they think he's gonna break out in
yeah,
dance number.
yeah, yeah. It's hilarious.
At least I guess that's one thing that doesn't necessarily come up. We don't have a whole lot of Japanese bands or Japanese musicians that have become popular in the US, for better or worse in that
Hmm.
respect.
Maybe if you explore sort of like the anime scene, there's like bands that are really popular. Like I started teaching this kid who was really into this band called Asian Kung Fu Generation. Really cool band. And they're I think they're like they have connections to Naruto or something. And they're like pretty huge in Japan, obviously, but also, they have international appeal or fan base through that kind of anime kind of stuff, I guess. But
Yeah. I mean that I guess that's one of the venues that you have left to explore. Maybe doing some
start
anime.
cosplaying.
Do the
I'm an
soundtrack.
elf. Yeah. Yeah. Halloween's coming up. So
Well, we're coming to the 15-minute mark in our conversation, so I wanted to remind our viewers who are joining us live, if you have any questions for Go, we'd be happy to get to them if we have time.
mhm.
So feel free to type them into the chat box if you're watching on YouTube. In the meantime, do you want to tell us about, I guess, the fact that the pandemic is still happening, right?
Mhm.
That's a pretty big deal. And I think for musicians especially, it's like our kind of livelihood like relies on the ability to perform live in front of like a tightly packed audience. Most music venues have poor ventilation.
Yeah.
It's basically impossible to socially distant. So, what has it been like, sort of navigating the pandemic for you?
Oh man. Um just trying not to fall into despair, basically. Just I mean, I was really fortunate to be employed throughout the entire pandemic. Like as I was emailing my last queue into Be Water, I got a phone call from a friend who I'd worked with like 7 years ago on a phone game, and he was now working for this big company uh, that made Clash of Clans, and they're working on a top secret game that just got announced as a beta. So um, I did all the music for that, a lot of the music for it, and then that definitely kept me occupied. And I don't know, it was as far as like my own music, I think I was too traumatized to like write any songs or something. Still maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that's one of the challenges where it's like I think people have sort of dealt with the pandemic in many ways, but if there seem to be these larger trends where, especially among creatives, either people are just kind of dumping everything that they've got because they're just going crazy in quarantine,
Mhm.
or the opposite, where it's like it's hard to create. It's hard to want to create when you're kind of facing the despair of the pandemic and
Mhm.
multiple overlapping crises like the spike in anti-Asian hate and
Mhm.
violence.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so-
It's all too much, man. Yeah.
yeah. Well, hopefully
Yeah.
we can emerge from the pandemic and get back to doing live gigs again sooner
Yeah.
than later,
Yeah. Yeah. I like playing with people in front of people in real life.
for
It's a nice
sure.
feeling.
We have a question from Shirley Omori, who asks, "Have you done any more movies, and will you be back at the San Diego Film Festival again?"
Hmm. I love the San Diego Film Festival. It's coming up, right? Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't decided if I was gonna physically go, but and I did do one more movie. Get this, this is a really bizarre kind of thing. Um, so in between like daylight savings and I Will Make You Mine, a producer hit me up saying, we saw Surrogate Valentine. We really liked you. Would you want to be in our movie?" And it was a movie that they had got funds together from Kickstarter, and it turned out it was Billie Eilish's mother and her brother Phineas, their movie. And at back then, he was just like he was a high school kid, like maybe 15, and Billy was, I don't know how old, but probably like 10 or 11. So I don't think I met her, or if I did, it's just a little kid. And then obviously they skyrocketed to the stratosphere. So that's just like my little sort of I play I play a guy who runs an open mic. It's like a music related movie. It's called Life Inside Out. You can watch it on Amazon Prime, I think. But I can't watch it because I had like this big zit throughout the whole filming because I was sweating so much because it was filmed in an actual venue. So every time I watch it, I'm like, ah, man. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's already
don't
bad
watch it
enough
like
under the venue lights, but imagine like
that.
the light crew on top of that.
Oh my god. Yeah, I can't watch that last scene in Surrogate Valentine because it looks like I'm melting, like, literally, like, so much sweat.
Thinking about the films again, the Surrogate Valentine trilogy. Did you have like a favorite moment or scene out of all three of the films?
I think so, like, I really like that, conversation I have with Lynn in the hotel room about the flower baby. That's something that came directly from my high school experience, like, there was a psychology class where it was called, like, it wasn't a psychology class, it was like a child care class or something, and or life skills class, and then you were assigned a bag of flour, and you had to draw like a little face on it, and it's like your baby, and you have to take it everywhere and care for it as if it's your child for like a week or something. And at the end of the week, like the parking lot was just like littered with flour because people were like throwing it up in the air or whatever. And then yeah, uh, some kid had their bag of flour stolen, and there was like a ransom note on their locker. It was like pretty traumatic but funny. So I wanted to put that into a script.
Yeah, it definitely felt like a realistic kind of moment. I
Yeah,
mean, there's a lot of realism throughout the films, but I think some of those dialogues in particular.
yeah. And then in daylight savings, all the stuff me and Ye Ming in Las Vegas was really came out well. I think it was just really well well put together, well shot.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of a good road movie, and to be able to have like basically two of those back to back, it was a really interesting departure. Then also, with "I Will Make You Mine," because it,
Hmm.
it is like it's stationary by comparison, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Has a different look and feel because of that. In addition, obviously, to Lynn's directing,
Hmm.
um, which I thought was fantastic. I mean,
Yeah. She knocked it out of the park. Yeah.
Um, we have another question from Shirley Omori who asks, "Do you test new music in front of a live audience? I saw you in LA at Tuesday Cafe, but you were in the audience, not performing. This was a while ago."
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I lived like basically down the street from there, so I I I hope they start doing that again. Um, I don't really test new material live. I mean, I guess there has to be a time when I have to play a new song, right? But it always feels so like, like here's a cake I made, and then but I didn't follow a recipe or whatever, or just kind of like some like ramshackle structure I'm trying to present that falls apart. But I guess you have to do that. So yeah, maybe I'll get over myself and do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, where do you test out new music, right? There's got to be a first time when you play that new song live, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's a hit, sometimes not so much.
Yeah.
Do you have like a musician to musician? Do you have like a particular moment, like funny story or embarrassing, even like related to performing something live?
Oh
Reactions from the
man.
audience that you weren't expecting?
Man, I guess like recently, I guess this is the last time I performed in front of people was at we had a actual in-person screening of I Will Make You Mine. And this was a situation where I wanted to play a new song, but it was like in a million pieces in my head. And I was just trying to like hold it together. And I think I was just so overwhelmed. One, because there was so many people. I hadn't been in front of that many people for over a year. And I had this weird thing where like I couldn't find the key of the song. Like it was like this weird like numbness. So I was just like all over the place and I was like I just stopped it, kind of like that famous scene in Saturday Night Live when Elvis Costello busts out, stops the song, and then starts a new song. So I kind of went to my go-to easy song, which is Just Like Heaven by The Cure. So that was a kind of embarrassing and surreal. It's like, what's happening? I totally losing it. Had like a mental breakdown or something. But it was fine in the end.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just get that block, and it's like,
Yeah.
I guess, like all creatives, it's like, how do you jump into that and do something different,
Yeah.
change it up? So I guess, what do you have coming up next? Do you have any projects that you're working on currently, in addition to the video game soundtrack that you're working on?
Um Not really, just trying to get better as a guitar player and, trying to keep myself together as far as stay in shape musically. Um, if this game goes global, which I hope it does, then I think I'll be working on that more. But if not, then um, I guess I'm gonna hopefully continue scoring films or looking for the next project.
And where can the Tadaima audience find more information about you, your music, and follow you, buy
I'm
your
probably
albums,
most
etc.?
I'm probably most active on Instagram, I guess. And then you can also go to my website, which is gonakamura.com. And yeah, I stay somewhat active in those worlds.
All right. Well, Go, I think we're coming to the end of our session. I really appreciate all the time that you've spent with us this evening. Thanks again for being a part of the Tadaima program. For folks who haven't yet seen the Surrogate Valentine trilogy, definitely watch it before the 25th of September. All three films are available on the website, as well as Go's soundtrack version of The Dragon Painter. So you can see all that and more on the Tadaima Online Film Festival. Um, but yeah, oh, and Shirley Omori says, I'd be happy to see a fourth sequel.
Maybe starring my niece. I don't know. It would have to be a younger generation or something. I'll get her to practice.
Definitely.
But
Any last thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with?
man, thank you so much for involving me in this great thing that you curated, and thanks to Kimiko for putting this great program on. It's really needed, and yeah, just grateful to be connected to you guys. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks again, Go, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Stay safe, and we'll see you at some more programs.
awesome. Bye.